Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sentence Diagramming 101. We have reached part 2. Yay! So, part 2 is really the whole chunk of the book. It contains patterns, phrases, verbals, clauses, types, and all the other weirdness that you're going to encounter in the English language. So, we've covered the basics. We've talked about parts of speech and word function. So, now we're ready to really get into it and talk about how all of these pieces of the English language fit together. And we are going to start with sentence patterns. These are common ways in English to put words together. And English is what we call an SVO language, meaning you have a subject, a verb, and then an object. Other languages don't follow this pattern, which is why English is sometimes really confusing. But we like our subjects at the beginning, we like our verbs in the middle, we like our objects at the end. Now you can play with that order at least a little bit. As you probably are familiar with the character of Yoda, who likes to switch words around, right? Do or do not, there is no try, that guy. So we have a little bit of flexibility in English, but not a lot. And these 5 patterns kind of show you how little flexibility there is once you start really breaking it down. And there are 5 sentence patterns in general. Each one, yes, can be broken down into different versions. So some books will divide this out into 10 different patterns. I lump them all together into 5 because I think it's easier and they're pretty related. But we're going to start with the first one, and it is a subject plus an intransitive verb, an SITV, which from here on out I'm going to call a sitva. That is not an official word. It just makes my life easier. I don't want to have to keep saying SITV, so sitva. These are sitvas, and you will see them occasionally. It's easy to spot because it only has a subject and a verb, right? The girl, subject, laughed. Intransitive verb, sitva. There's nothing else happening here. We've got an adjective, the, and that's pretty much it. Now, this doesn't mean that sitvas will be short. Sometimes they'll be really long with a bunch of prepositional phrases like this. The girl on the swing laughed in delight. Well, remember, we're going to do the same thing we did last chapter with these prepositional phrases. We got to get rid of them. So you've got on the swing is a prepositional phrase. It's an adjective telling me which girl, the girl on the swing. And then in delight is another prepositional phrase. It's acting as an adverb, tells me how she laughed. So really my sentence is girl laughed. We're still back here again in sitva territory. If you look at Remy snores through the night, you're like through the night, prepositional phrase. So I'm left with Remy, subject, snores, verb. There it is, intransitive verb, sitva. And I don't know if you remember this from before, but Freddie always returns at the end of each movie. So you've got at the end, prepositional phrase of each movie, prepositional phrase. So you're left with Freddie always returns, but always is an adverb. So Freddie returns. There it is. Boom. Subject, intransitive verb. Now we're going to get into diagramming because remember, the book is called Fun with Diagramming. So here we are. And this is what happens when you try to turn English into math. You draw lots of lines. So the first thing that you do when diagramming is you draw this little straight horizontal line and then you break it about a third of the way from the left. So it's not an even distribution. You want a lot more space on the right than you have on the left. And the idea is that you write your subject in this upper left-hand quadrant and you write your verb in this upper right-hand quadrant. So if your sentence is the girl on the swing laughed in delight, you're like, girl laughed. Boom. You've diagrammed your first sentence. But wait, there's more because you've got on the swing and in delight. If you want a visual of how little prepositional phrases do in English, look at this. Well, first we'll start with the. The is an adjective. It's just going to hang out on the bottom. It's not doing anything. It's just an adverb or an adjective. And it's under girl because it modifies girl. Which girl? The girl. That's why it's here and not here. And yes, you lean them, slant the line a little bit as it hangs off the bottom. So they're not straight up and down grids. You're going to have a lot of right leaning slants happening in your diagramming. Now, prepositional phrases are similar to modifiers because they are modifiers. But what you do is you put the modifier on the slant, so on, then you put a straight line with the word, the object of the preposition. So in this case, swing, and then which swing? The swing. So the tells me about swing. On the swing is the whole prepositional phrase, and all of that tells me about this girl, which is why it goes underneath. If we move over to in delight, that tells me how she was laughing. How makes it an adverb. Adverbs modify verbs. So in this case, you're going to have a little slanty line. You're going to put your preposition there. Now, thing to keep in mind, for the most part, diagramming is a one word per space situation, unless you have a proper name or like a movie name like Nightmare on Elm Street. You can put that all in one spot, or you can pull it apart, up to you. But you're only going to have little prepositions, right? So in, on, of, to. Now, when you get longer ones like during, then your lines are just going to get longer. Notice that you're leaving a little tail here, right? This little extra bit. So your preposition goes on the diagonal and your object of the preposition goes on the horizontal. And there it is. You've diagrammed the whole sentence. So moving on, if we go back to this, Remy snored through the night, you want to get in the habit for this class of doing this first, where you label each word before you try and diagram it. And this will save you time and energy, because diagrams are just going to get bigger and bigger and longer and more complicated. So if you start with this, all right, find the prepositional phrase, get rid of it, right? Put parentheses, through is your preposition. Night is the object of the preposition, and then the is an adjective telling me about night. And then this whole thing, through the night, tells me when. So it is a prepositional phrase acting as an adverb. So it goes with the word snored. And then Remy is my subject and intransitive verb snored. So I have Remy snored, and when did he snore? Through night, the. Then what if we do the baby in her arms giggled at her smile? So we're going to pull out our prepositional phrases. In her arms. So in is my preposition. Arms is the object of the preposition. And then her is an adjective telling me which arms. And then that whole thing tells me which baby, the one in her arms, right? As opposed to the one sitting on someone's lap across the room. So that whole thing is an adjective. And then at her smile is why the baby is laughing. So at is my preposition. Smile is the object of that preposition. Her tells me which smile. So it's an adjective. And then that whole thing is acting as an adverb describing the giggle. So you've got baby giggled. So it's going to look like this. And it's the baby goes in her arms. And then at her smile goes with the giggled. So that's why identifying whether it is a adjective or an adverb for your prepositions makes sense or matters, because you need to know what word it goes with. If we move on and do the ball soared in the air, you've got into the air is acting as an adverb. Into is your preposition. Air is the object of the preposition. And then the tells me which air, the air. So, and that whole thing tells me where, so adverb. And then so you've got the ball soared, and then where did it soar? Into the air. And then the action movie ended on a cliffhanger. On a cliffhanger, prepositional phrase, right? Tells me where it ended. So it's an adverb. It's going to tell me about ended. And then the and action are adjectives describing which movie. Oh, here's Remy snoring. So the movie, the action movie, right? So all of your adjectives go underneath the word that they modify. All your adverbs, same. And then prepositional phrases also. Now, how do you decide what goes where? You move from left to right. So the comes before action. So you have the and then action. And the way you know what the capital letter of the sentence was is that you maintain it. So the was capitalized there in the sentence. So it's capitalized on the diagram as well. And then there's no punctuation. You don't put commas or periods or anything. Moving on to Freddie, or back to Freddie, as it were. So we've got Freddie always returns, and then the rest were prepositional. Now this gets weird, because you've got Freddie returns, he always returns, that's an adverb on its own, and then he returns at the end, but he doesn't return of the movie, right? Of the movie is referring to the end, so it hangs off of the end, because that's the word it's actually modifying. So when you're trying to figure out these prepositional phrases, kind of read it to yourself. So returns at the end. Yeah, that makes sense. Returns of the movie. No, that doesn't make any sense. So at the end of the movie. Oh, there it is. So end of the movie. That's the way it goes there. Now, sometimes you have compound subjects, right? You may have more than one subject. In this case, you get to draw what my very first linguistics class has deemed rocket ships. I don't know why they decided they were rocket ships, but that's what they called them. So that's what we call them. And it just makes life easier. So, you draw two lines, you make them join with a point, and then you continue a single line if there's only one verb. So subject one goes here, subject two goes here. Then you draw a dotted vertical line between the two and you write the and out, right? Because there's like subject one and subject two. And then you do your dividing line, right? So this is this line here. This line here is this line, and then you draw your verb. So let's see what a couple of those might look like. You might have subject one and then a verb, right? Or you may have a subject and then you might have a verb and then another verb. So you might have a rocket ship right in the middle of your sentence. Or you might have, the object of a preposition. You may have more than one. So these rocket ships are going to kind of show up all over anytime you have more than one thing in a sentence. And then the other thing you might run into is what that first class called pitchforks, with three or four, or, sometimes it can get crazy. You get like 5 or 6 different lines. That's when you've got a list of items that you're bringing to the sentence. And then what you do is you put an X where all the commas are, and then you have an and between the last two, words. So let's kind of see this in action. If you've got in Avatar, Jake Sully and Neytiri are the main characters. Well, in Avatar is a prepositional phrase, and it tells me where they are the main characters, so it's going to modify my verb. And then I've got a couple of adjectives here, but my real sentence is Jake Sully, Neytiri, and, right, there's my and, my coordinating conjunction. And then they are, and then they are characters. All right, so we're going to get into this in a little bit here, but this is a subject complement. Remember we talked about complements already? The way you show a complement is with a backward leaning slash like that. And then we know that they are in Avatar, and we know that they are the characters and they are main characters. So what you'll find in this book is a lot of information comes at the same time because we keep using the same things. So right now we are focusing on the idea of compounds in subjects in transitive verb sentences, sitvas, but you're going to find compounds everywhere. Now, whoosh. Sometimes you may have compound adverbs, right? You may have more than one. In this case, you've got your 2 lines where your adverbs go, and in this case, you just draw a horizontal dotted line between them like that. And I realize this is a lot of lines and a lot of drawing. That's why you have the book as a reference, so you can always go back and just look at it and be like, how do I do this thing? Oh, like that. And the best way to learn sentence diagramming is to do it. Practice, practice, practice. And eventually, some of it will start to come naturally, and some of it you still will have to look up, and that's fine. But I went right to the store, or to a restaurant, to a store, and to a smoothie shop. So I went today. So that's my adverb by itself. And then these are prepositional phrases. Now, word count, generally it's one word per line unless you have a multi-word verb or you're dealing with a proper noun. Those would be the other, or proper name, depending. The 2 situations where you'd have more than one word on there. And then, like I said at the beginning, sometimes people subdivide these things. So you can take a sitva, right? A subject intransitive verb sentence, and you can divide it into 2 different things. They call it, you can say it's regular sitva, it's a subject intransitive verb, and you can call it a sitva A, which is a subject intransitive verb plus an adverb, right? So things like today, tomorrow, anything that tells you when or where or how or any of those adverby things, those are going to be sitva A's. For our purposes, I'm happy if you just know it's a sitva. You don't need to know that it is the sitva of the variety A, But some books will divide these out, so that's how you end up with 10 patterns instead of 5. So if you've got the girl on the swing laughed in delight, do we have a single adverb? Nope, we got prepositional phrases. So this is a sitva. And then in delight, it's acting as an adverb, but it's not an adverb. It's a prepositional phrase. So there's a difference between acting as a thing, performing the function of a thing, and being a thing. And in this case, you need an adverb. Through the sky, preposition, or through the night, sorry, prepositional phrase. Yeah, they're everywhere. Baby in her arms, giggled at her smile, still a sitva. Soared into the air, sitva. Ended on a cliffhanger, sitva. We don't have any single adverbs here. Let's keep going. We finally get one. Always returns. Always is an adverb. So finally we have a sitva a. There it is. And then I'll add more just to show you that they do exist. They just didn't happen to show up in the examples I gave you earlier. But if you've got the baby giggled yesterday, yesterday is an adverb, tells you when, so that would be a sitva a. If you snored last night, again, sitva a. Generally, you can replace a prepositional phrase with an adverb that gives you similar info if you have a burning need for, a sitva a in your life. And that should be your face right now at you're done. But if you're confused, go back and restart this video. Take your time, practice, go through this practice exercise, and then watch the video going over it. And check it out in the answer key, and then that will help you get a feel for how to diagram sitvas before we move on to the next type of diagram or type of pattern.